Well, good morning, everybody. I'm going to do a formal introduction of myself. My name is Pardo, and I'd like to introduce you to my white cane. I had a friend of mine say to me, I have a great name for your white cane, Seymour. So, everybody, this is Seymour. Now, continuing with my formal introduction, I'd like to tell you that I am the world's greatest blind Mexican Canadian hockey player.
Yeah.
I have all the stats. I have the most points, most goals, most assists, most games played. Now the disclaimer. I am the only blind Mexican Canadian hockey player in the world.
That you know of.
But it is good to be a goat at something. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to be here at the Alberta Sports Hall of Fame to talk to you about blind hockey. I will tell you about the game of hockey, how it's played today. I will also tell you how I got involved with blind hockey, and I will tell you the history of blind hockey. And I'm going to highlight some very important milestones that Albertans contributed in the evolution of blind hockey. And I believe I'm well positioned to give you this talk because another claim to fame I have is that of being the longest playing blind hockey player in Alberta, most likely Canada, which means the world.
Yeah.
So blind hockey. Blind hockey is hockey as you know it. On skates, full equipment, 6-on-6, but we've made some adaptations to allow us to play. First and foremost, the most obvious is the puck. So this is the standardized puck that is used in blind hockey everywhere. It wasn't always, and I'll get to that later on. But you see, it's metal, it's got ball bearings in it, it's bigger than your normal puck, and of course, it's black as pucks should be. And you may ask, does it hurt when you get hit by a metal puck? Well, actually, yes. Yes, it does hurt when you get hit with this puck, but blind hockey players are tough. Now, before I continue with the other adaptations, I'd like to explain to you who qualifies to be a blind hockey player. So blind hockey conforms to the International Paralympic Organization's definition of a blind athlete. And there are 3 categories. B1, totally blind. B2, light perception up to 5%, and B3, 5% up to 10%. Now, within those classifications, you could have all kinds of eye issues. You could have tunnel vision, where you have no peripheral vision. You only see through the center of your eyes. You could be the opposite. You could have peripheral vision and no central vision. Or you could just have clouded vision or any of the other issues. The key is that with any corrective measure, such as eyeglasses or contact lenses, you need to have 10% or less vision to be a blind athlete. Now back to the adaptations. The next adaptation in the equipment world is the hockey net. So a regular hockey net stands 4 feet tall. The blind hockey net is 3 feet tall. Why is that? Well, when this puck is in the air, it doesn't make any noise. But we don't disqualify goals that are scored with raised shots. Instead, we reduce the scorable area by that 25% to help the goalies. To be a goalie in blind hockey, you have to be B1, which is totally blind. Or, if you have vision, you have to be blindfolded. Now, why is that? That is because being a goaltender, it's probably the most advantageous position to have some sight. So just imagine if one team had a goalie that had 10% vision and the other was a B1 totally blind, there's a disadvantage. So to equal everything out, goalies in blind hockey have to be blindfolded or B1. Now those are the major adaptations to equipment. How about rules? The major rule difference, although we play with regular rules as you would know it, in blind hockey, we have one additional rule that you will not find in any other hockey program. It is called the pass rule. So what is the pass rule? The pass rule says that when you are on offense and the team crosses the opposing team's blue line, a pass has to be made by one attacking player to another attacking player before a shot can be taken on net that would result in a legal goal. Now, why are we doing that? That is to prevent players with high sight, high skill level from dominating a game and taking the puck from their end to the other end and scoring at will. It stresses team. So there is no breakaway resulting in a goal in blind hockey. A pass has to be made. So how do we indicate that during the game? We have a special whistle in addition to the regular whistle that when blown by the referee indicating that a pass has been made, two things happen. First thing is that the team on attack, all the players now know that a legal pass has been made and that a shot can be taken at the net. And of course, it alerts the defending team and the goaltender that a shot is going to be directed at them. So really, though, that's in essence the changes that are made in blind hockey. And you may ask yourself, is blind hockey more dangerous? There's a bunch of people with limited vision and a metal puck that hurts. Well, maybe, maybe not. In my 48 years of playing blind hockey, I've only had 4 ambulance rides to the emergency department. That averages less than 1 per decade. Although one was rather dramatic in the mid-'80s when the Calgary blind hockey team was up in Edmonton playing the program up there. In those bitter Highway 2 rivalries, I got tripped up and slid into the boards with my feet first. They got braced against the boards and one of the Edmonton players fell on them, breaking both my legs. So I spent 6 weeks with casts on both my legs. But what did I tell you? Blind hockey players are tough. Now, a little bit about the history of blind hockey. No surprise to everybody, but Canadians invented blind hockey. And the earliest recordings of Canadians playing hockey happened at a place called the William Ross Macdonald School for the Blind in Brantford, Ontario. That school still exists. So back in 1936, one of the teachers decided to introduce hockey as part of the physical education program. And they would have started playing with what for the longest time was considered the puck in blind hockey. It was an emptied out tin juice can painted black. Made noise, but not very performant as a puck. Now the next milestone in blind hockey happened in 1972 with the formation of the very first community-based blind hockey program and blind hockey team, the Toronto Ice Owls. They were the true pioneers in blind hockey. Now the cool thing is the next oldest program for blind hockey is actually here in Alberta, in Calgary. In 1975, 2 Lions Club members, Glenn Dawes and Larry Steeves, decided to form a blind hockey program and outdoor ice at Lakeview Community in Calgary. Now they had ulterior motives for doing that. Glenn Dawes had a son named Stephen, who had learned how to play blind hockey at the William Ross Macdonald School for the Blind. So when he moved back to Calgary, his father saw an opportunity to start a program where Stephen could continue to play hockey and the game could be introduced to blind Calgarians who never attended the school. And Larry Steeves also had a blind son named Gary. Now in 1975, Gary was too young to come out to the program, but his dad knew that by starting a program, it would be there for Gary in the future, and Gary did end up years later joining the Calgary program and learning how to play hockey. Now I talked to Stephen about his time in Brantford School for the Blind, and he had a cool story that while he was there learning, a sighted kid in Brantford would come out and play with the blind kids. That famous Brantford citizen was Wayne Gretzky. And the rumor has it that it was Wayne Gretzky's time playing with the blind kids that he honed one of his major skills in hockey, that of the blind pass. Okay, maybe I started that wrong. So 1976, that was a momentous year for blind hockey in Alberta, Canada, and the world. That's when I started. How did I start? How did I get involved in blind hockey? Well, my parents, my father, Luis, was Mexican. My mother, Sandra, was Canadian. And they were both blind. As a matter of fact, my mother, Sandra, went to the William Ross Macdonald School for the Blind when she was young. Now, my parents met at CNIB in Toronto, fell in love, went to the eye specialist at the time to see that if they had children, would they have the visual impairment. They were misdiagnosed. They were told that they had separate, different eye disorders from each other and that their children would have normal vision, but would be carriers of the genetic eye disorders. So my dad said, I'm Mexican, want to have the family in Mexico, took my mom down to Mexico City. I would have had an older brother, but at 8 months, he died. But he was born with full sight, so my parents kept going. My sister was born next, who's almost 2 years older than I, with full sight, and then I was born with full sight. Everything was great, except for my sister being those 2 years older. She was the first to show early signs of the visual impairment, and our parents realized that yes, indeed, they had exactly the same eye disorder and that they were now a family of blind people in Mexico. So they made the most amazing decision for my sister and I, and that was to immigrate to Canada, where we have had the most amazing life because of that decision. So we immigrated to Toronto, and my dad was determined that while I still had sight, that I needed to learn the game of hockey. So my father, being blind, he would actually build a hockey rink in our backyard in Toronto every winter so that I could learn to skate and shoot, stick handle, and he signed me up for organized hockey. So at the time, I was going to a separate school system in Toronto, so he registered me for the Catholic hockey program in Toronto, and I was playing for St. Timothy's, and we won a league championship and a playoff championship, and I was a good little player. So fast forward to 1976, my parents divorced, and we were living in St. Catharines at the time, and in January of 76, we moved out to Calgary. And that's when I played my last half season in organized sighted hockey, Midget C with West Hillhurst Community. Now, I was still a good little player, but at 14, it was one of those moments where I started to lose more of my sight. So I could do everything. I could shoot, skate, stick handle. The one thing I couldn't do was receive passes. I was reacting just that second too late. And when your teammates realize that you can't receive a pass, they stop passing to you. So I realized in a very sad way that hockey was done for me. But wait, how lucky was I? I was in Calgary in 76, where the year before a blind hockey program had started in Calgary. Now, how did I hear about that? I joined another organization called Alberta Sports and Recreation Association for the Blind. The two was in its infancy back in 1975. It started with the mandate to provide sport and recreation opportunities for blind Albertans. And they were part of that pioneering movement for sport for the disabled, which has now been rebranded Parasport. And it just so happened that I was also a good little runner. So in the spring of 76, I joined ASRAB, and I made the first Team Alberta that went to the very first Canadian Summer Games for the disabled as a track athlete, and just coincidentally won the first of many track titles, national track titles. But it was with ASRAB that I heard about the Lions hockey program. So in March of 76, I played my last game in sighted organized hockey. In October, I laced them up with the blind program, and I've been playing ever since. So that brings me into 1977. 1977, a program was starting up in Edmonton. And so by April of 1977, we had the first ever National Blind Hockey Championship in Toronto, hosted by the Toronto Ice Owls. And I'm pleased to say that Team Alberta, combined Edmonton and Calgary, we won that first ever national tournament. And it turned out to be the only national championship that has been team-based and the only national tournament that was played up until 2014, and I'll get to that in a moment. So that's pretty special for Alberta. We are the only team-based national champion ever recorded in blind hockey. Now, at that same time, Larry Steeves, the same guy who helped start the Calgary program, had an idea for a puck, something to replace that juice tin can. And so he teamed up with a Calgary philanthropist, a business owner by the name of Walt Healy. Some people might know that Walt Healy was a motorcycle store in Calgary. And so Walt Healy had the money and the connections to try and get a new puck created. And what they came up with was a soldered metal puck with ball bearings. And I hope you'll go to the display here at the hall because it has the evolution of the blind hockey puck that was developed here in Alberta. So we started with the juice tin can. You'll see the puck that was developed here in Alberta, which looks a little bit different than this one. And then this is the standardized puck that everybody has agreed to now play with. So that's very special. That's another major contribution that Alberta has made to the game of blind hockey. Now, in 1978, ASREB finally took over funding the blind hockey programs. So Edmonton and Calgary were being funded by ASREB. Up until 1994. Now, in 1994, unfortunately, ASREB came across some challenging financial times, and so they cut funding blind hockey. Now, in Edmonton, they just shut down, and they did not start up for a number of years. But in Calgary, we weren't going to let that happen. So a fellow by the name of Randy Cameron, another blind player, has now moved to Ontario, but he and I decided that we weren't going to let that happen, and we started the Calgary Blind Hockey Association and called our team the Calgary Seeing Ice Dogs, which this is really the best logo in sport, bar none. And so we are now celebrating this fall 30 years of continuing the blind hockey program in Calgary. Thanks a lot to the sponsorship from the Calgary Flames alumni who have been supporting our program every year with money that goes to rental of ice, and also CCB, Canadian Council for the Blind, that every 2 years gives us money. So we will be celebrating 30 years this fall. Now, to continue with history of blind hockey in Alberta, the Edmonton program restarted when ASREB was able to improve their funding process, and the most recent newbie to Alberta is the Central Alberta Bullseye that were started by a fellow named Dustin Butterfield back in 2019. So now Alberta has 3 blind hockey programs and hockey teams. The Edmonton program still goes by the original name, the Seahawks, Seehawks. Now I'm going to round up just a little bit of the history with national, what's been happening nationally. So as I mentioned, 1977 was the last time we had a national tournament up until 2014. Now what got us there was a fellow by the name of Mark DeMontis out of Toronto. In 2009, he saw an opportunity to do something nationally because at that time it was just separate hockey programs. For example, there was the Seahawks, the Seeing Ice Dogs, Montreal has a team, Toronto had a team, and in Vancouver, a team was started called the Eclipse, started by Larry's son, Gary. Anyways, Mark DeMontis saw an opportunity to do something nationally that was lacking. So he started a program nationally called Courage Canada Blind Hockey. And he has been instrumental in the growth of blind hockey in the recent time, including bringing back a national tournament. Now, the difference between the national tournament today, which he started in 2014 and has been running every year, is that now teams are not represented as teams. There's no Seeing Ice Dogs against Vancouver Eclipse, for example. Individual blind hockey players register for the national tournament, and they are put into new teams, combining players from across Canada, now the US, and also the world, forming new teams. And they're based in divisions. So, for example, there is a kids division, there is a women's division, but I will note that women have always been playing blind hockey. We've always been co-ed. They've just been part of the regular teams. Now with the growth of blind hockey, there's enough women that they have a special division just to highlight their talents, and they still play in the regular divisions. So there's a women's division, there's a low vision / new player division, and then there's the open division, which is for high sight, high skill players. All this is really thanks to Mark DeMontis, and I want to give accolades. This week, he was named the recipient of the NHL. I forgot. I'm sorry, the name of the award. Basically, he won a special NHL award for his community effort in developing blind hockey in Canada and the world. So I think that brings us up to speed where hockey is in Canada. And I'm going to close off with a personal story, mostly to highlight how blind hockey can change a person's life. Now, it's understood that the benefits at a physical level in playing sport, that's pretty well understood. And the benefits in socialization playing in sport are also well acknowledged. And I would say that it's even more important in sports for adaptive sports or parasports, because that brings a real community together of like people. I've had many people that have joined the Seeing Ice Dogs say to me that the biggest thing for them has been being part of their own community, where they get to share the experiences that they go through in life. But my story for you in closing is about how sport can change you in ways you wouldn't even expect. So I'm going to take you back to 1977 when I played at that national tournament in Toronto, the first ever. And I was 15 years old, playing with a bunch of adults, but I was so excited. So made sure I had my skates sharpened in Calgary, and on Friday or the Thursday we flew down to Toronto. The Friday was our first game against Team Newfoundland. And we get to the arena, putting on my gear, time to put the skates on. I have one skate. Somehow back in Calgary, I did not see that only one skate made my hockey bag. Now the coach, Jim Least, was panicking because myself and another fellow by the name of Gerard Parent were the star players, and he really needed us for the tournament. So he was scrambling, and the best he could do for a pair of skates for me was a pair of trainer goalie skates. I don't even know if they still use trainer goalie skates, but let me describe them. They are much heavier than regular skates, and they have two blades. That's the best he could find. That's all I could wear. So out I went. Let's just say I was better than a pylon, but not much better. But Team Alberta prevailed, and we won 4-1 with the rights to move on to the championship against the Toronto Ice Dogs. Now, the story of my skate dilemma went through the team in Newfoundland, and a fellow with my size skates offered me his skates for me to play in that championship game. That championship game, we won 11-3, and I scored 5 goals. So that was the moment that I really understood altruism. This fella from Newfoundland, he didn't have to lend me his skates. There was nothing in it for him, but he did. That really changed my life. Since then, for example, since 1987, I've been a part of a service organization called the Canadian Progress Club. It's like a service organization like Lions or Kiwanis, where you give of yourself to help the community. I've been doing that since 1987. And another example, in 2005, I went to Tanzania and for a safari and came back and started my own project called Bridge the Gap Tanzania, where I help 2 schools in Tanzania and go back every 2 years. The point being that I learned altruism and that ability to give back from my experience with sport. So I'd like to thank everybody for lending me your ears, and I hope you have a super day here at the Hall.